Bootstrap custom forms. So the objectives of this video is to show you how to use custom checkbox, custom radio, default custom radio, default custom range rather, custom select menu, custom file upload, and also the switch, custom switch. So the custom checkbox. So to create a custom checkbox, wrap a container element using div, so example div or maybe span, with a class of custom control and custom checkbox around the checkbox. Then add the custom control input to the input with type equals checkbox. So the appearance will be something like this. By default, it is something like this, but if we use the Bootstrap or these classes, it will be something like this. Tip: if you use labels for accompanying text, add the custom control label class to it. Note that the value of the 4 attributes should match the ID of the checkbox. So this is how it appears. So again, we have the division, place custom control and custom checkbox, and then inside it will be our input with the class custom control input and the type equals checkbox. So here's the code. Again, we have the division with the class custom control and custom checkbox. And inside this, we have the input with the type checkbox and the class equal to custom control input. Then you can provide the ID and the name. And then if you use a label, you use the class custom control label. And then the 4, this one should match the ID of the input. So check this custom checkbox. So that is our code. For custom switch, so to create a custom toggle switch, wrap a container element like div again with a class custom control and custom switch around a checkbox. So it is also a checkbox. Then add the custom control input class to the checkbox. So the appearance will be something like this. So it's a switch on and off. That's why it's toggle switch or a toggle. Yes, it's toggle switch or a custom switch. So again, we have the division, and so we wrap around the input inside the division with custom control and custom switch. And then we have here our input tag with the type checkbox and custom control input. Then we have the ID. Then again, we have the label. So custom control label, and then the 4 should match the ID. So similar with the first one, but except here we use custom switch. Custom radio buttons. To create a custom radio button, wrap a container element like div with a class custom control and custom radio around the radio button. Then add the custom control input to the input with type equals radio. Tip: you use labels for accompanying text, add the custom control label class to it. Note that the value for the attribute should match the ID of the radio. Again, the appearance, this is the Bootstrap custom radio and this is the default radio. So the circle is quite bigger and of course the line is thinner. So the code, we have again our division. So you wrap around, so that means you place it inside. We have the class custom control and custom radio, and then we have our input tag with type equals radio and then custom control input. Then we have the ID, custom radio, name equals example, and then the value. So this will be the value if we check on this checkbox. Then label, excuse me, label class equals control, custom control label. Then 4, again, this one should match the ID. So we have here custom radio. Inline custom form controls. If you want the custom form controls to sit side by side, so inline, add the custom control inline to the wrapper. So to the wrapper, to the div or the container. So as an example here, we have 2 radio buttons inline. So we can also do that with a checkbox or with a switch. But in this example, we use a radio button. So here, we have here our division and another container. So custom control, custom radio, but we also added the custom control inline. So we have input type radio, just like excuse me, we have a while ago. So I'll not be explaining anymore. And then here we have another radio button. So again, wrap around this container, and you again place a custom control inline. So that will make these two controls inline or side by side. Then we have the custom select menu, or the drop down. It's just a drop down combo box. To create a custom select menu, add the custom select class to the select element. So select is a HTML. So we select /select, and then we have the options, option for the options. So the appearance will be something like this. So this is for the custom select menu, and by default the appearance is something like this. So here we have the select /select. So we have the name, and what is important here is we place a class equals custom select, and then we have the options. So here, this is the default one. That's why it's selected first. And then we have here the values. That means if we choose this one, the value will be this. If we choose this, the value will be this one. Now we can also change the sizes of the select menu. So use the custom select SM class to create a small select menu, and the custom select LG class for a large one. So the small one is something like this. By default, it's the medium size. If you don't specify, it's the medium size, and then this is the large select. So as an example, so the same with the previous one, except that we add custom select SM, custom select LG, rather than just custom select. Custom range. Excuse me. To create a custom range menu, add the custom range class to an input with type equals range. So custom range will appear something like this, and by default it is something like this. By the default one is sometimes dependent on your browser. So we have your label for custom range, which matches the ID. Input type equals range. Class equals custom range. So you just add the class equals custom range. Then ID, then name. We can also specify the minimum and the maximum value. So min equals the minimum value and max equals the maximum value. Custom file upload. To create a custom file upload, wrap a container element with a class of custom file around the input type equals file. Then add the custom file input to it. If you use labels for accompanying text, add the custom file label class to it. Note that the value of the for attribute should match the ID of the checkbox. Note that you also have to include some jQuery code if you want the name of the file to appear when you select a specific file. So the appearance is something like this. By default, it is something like this. Okay, so this is one is of course a lot better than this one. So how do you do this? So you wrap around the input with custom file, and then we have the input with type equals file, and then the class is custom file input. Then we have the label with the class custom file label, and then for matches the ID. Then choose file. And then we have here now our JavaScript. So we have the custom file input, so we're referring to this class, or maybe you can also refer to the ID, especially if you have a lot of this. But if you have only one of this, then you can refer to the class. And then we have the change event. So once it is changed, then we get the file name from this input box. So we get the value, then we split the value, then we pop, that means we get the last one. So we get the last value, which is actually the file name, because the first values are the path and the last one is the file name. So we have the file name, and then the siblings. So these are the two siblings. Custom file label, add class selected, HTML, and then file name. Okay, now we have the custom forms, and how do we get their value or state? So this is an example code in jQuery. To get a checkbox, if it is checked or not, is we use the is and then check. So with this, we can have a true or false value, true when checked and false when not. So the same is true with the switch, because a switch is also a checkbox with a different appearance. So we use also the is checked. And the same is true with the radio buttons. We can use the is checked. So that if it is checked, then we can now get the value. So to get the value, we just use that val. But first, we should determine if it is checked or not before we get the value. And then for the drop down menu or select menu, we use that val. So just like ordinary input box. And also for a range, we also use that val. So let's try now to show you at least a demo of the controls. So I have here now a code. So you notice here, I have a card in a container. I have a card, and I have a checkbox. Okay, so take a look at the code. Custom control, custom checkbox, checkbox, custom control input. So, and then custom switch for this one. So we have a switch, and then 2 radio buttons, custom radio. So I can use here inline if I want it to be side by side, but this one is not side by side. So we have 2 different ID, and then this one is for this one. And then I have here now my select. So custom select. So these are the options, and I have here the custom range. You notice I did not place anymore the file upload because we already have the jQuery for that. So bottom class equals bottom primary, and then we have here the bottom. So what this program will do is to display the controls, and then once I click on this button, the click event will be triggered. So button display click, and then I'm going to get the value of the checkbox if it is checked or not. The switch is if it is a custom switch, if it is checked or not. Then the 2 radio buttons. Then I'm going to determine what was selected, and also what is the value of the range. Okay, by default, the range value is from 0 to 100 if you did not specify. Then after getting the value of the range, I will just be displaying the value of the checkbox, the switch, the radio button 2, cars, and range. So I'll just display it in an alert box. So let's try to run this program. So launch in Chrome. So these are now my controls. So let's say this one is checked, this one is not. I'm going to check custom radio 2. I'm going to select Audi, and then I'm going to move this here and then display the values. So you notice that the first checkbox is checked, yes. Switch is not checked, so it's false. Radio 1 is false, radio 2 is true. Car is Audi, so that's what we have chosen, and this one is on value 76. So okay, so let's uncheck this, check this one, check this, select another car, let's say the Volvo, and then maybe move this one somewhere here, and then display the values. So checkbox is now false, switch is true, radio 1 is true, radio 2 is false. We selected Volvo, and the range now is equal to 10. So that's now an example. So thank you very much for viewing this video.